Welcome back. It's so great that you're here. This is Arlene, and this is Healing the Hearts of Healthcare. And this week, I want to talk to you about why it's so important that you face your fears. And you know this, you're a healthcare worker, and the work that you do every single day is full of incredible challenges. And it pushes you to the brink every single day. So you need to heal your heart so that you can come back the next day and do it all over again. And this whole idea of facing our fears actually came to me because I just recently watched the Bratz documentary that was produced by Andrew McCarthy, and you can watch it on Hulu. That's at least how I streamed it. And I will tell you, I was absolutely mesmerized by this documentary. If you're like me and you love the 80s and I love all things John Hughes and all of his films, I feel like what I learned from that documentary just taught me something that I really didn't think of when it came to us as human beings. And I'm going to remind you, if you don't know the quick down and dirty story, in 1985, there was an article written in the New York Magazine, and it was written by an editor named David Blum. And I loved this documentary, but the article that he wrote, he was the one that was responsible for coining the term and calling all of the actors in the 80s the Brat Pack. And I think it was fascinating because it was part of actually an interview that he did with Emilio Estevez. And he says he followed him for a few days and that idea just naturally popped into his head. And what I found to be so fascinating in that documentary is that how that idea of the Brat Pack stuck with all of those amazing actors during that time period. I mean, we're talking about some of my favorites, right? Rob Lowe and Andrew McCarthy and Demi Moore and Molly Ringwald, Ali Sheedy, Judd Nelson. I mean, these were all extraordinary actors back in the day. And when I think about the article, I think about in the documentary, the authenticity and the rawness and the just beautiful depiction of how once that article came out overnight, how it impacted every single one of those actors in a similar way. It tapped into their fears, and it created an altered sense that really wasn't who they all believed they were. In fact, Andrew McCarthy is great in the documentary because he really highlights that some of us weren't even hanging out with each other, but it just, the media took it and ran with it. And I think overnight, you think about this. I mean, this is nearly 40 years ago. And here we are now, fast forward, and Andrew does a fabulous job of bringing all these different actors back together to have conversations around the coining of that phrase, the impact that it had in their life, and how they are still left at this point sorting out many of the fears that they felt held them back from those words. And I'm going to remind you here in life school, it is just a perfect example of how one false narrative, just one, can change the way you see yourself, and it could have a negative trajectory when you think about you and your future potential on this earth. And I will constantly remind you here in life school, you are here doing such important work. You are a healer. You take care of perfect strangers every single day. That's your superpower. That is what you were born and destined to do. And so I would absolutely challenge you to really think about what are your fears and how are they holding you back. Now, for some of you, it could be that you just have a fear of failure, that you fear that you're not going to live up to your full potential, or that maybe you're just wasting your life. I know for me, when I listened last night to that documentary, I thought when Andrew McCarthy said, "What is your fear?" I turned over to my husband and I said, "What's your fear?" And we had a really good discussion about it because I think it's so important to really think about that from the sense of how fear can hold us back, because it has tremendous power. Like, it's gripping to you as a person. It can prevent you from moving yourself forward. That is how powerful fear is. So I want you to think about all the times in your life that fear prevented you from really stepping forward and getting what was rightfully owned, which is you achieving your destiny. And that's really hard for many of you to do, because I know for me, the whole reason why I came forward with this podcast was when I was reading my journal articles and I was looking back at all of those things that I wrote during that very dark period of COVID. I really could see very clearly how it impacted me as a person, how it altered the sense of who I was as a caregiver. I mean, here I was, a professional healthcare worker, and I was left second guessing myself and thinking about all the ways that I just wanted to disappear and crawl back under the covers and just sort of hit reset. And I share that with you because I know that is how many of you feel working in the field of healthcare. But I want to remind you, when we think about fear, and we think about it really purely from this sort of neurobiological lens, we all know this, that, fear in itself is processed in the amygdala. I mean, when the amygdala detects a threat, what happens? It triggers the release of all those stress hormones, things like adrenaline and cortisol, and that just pushes your body right into fight or flight response. Like, that happens because when scientists have looked at this, they've seen this evolution over time, right? It's an emotion, it's a protection. That evolving was really designed to help us as human beings to be able to detect threats and to be able to take care of dealing with it in our environment. And that's really a good thing. And I think when I think about it, I will tell you, I recognize every single day that fear can seep into your mind. It can settle very quickly, deeply in your heart here. And before you know it, you are left second guessing and thinking of things from a different perspective. So I'm going to remind you, here in Life School, we are all here to do important work. We are here to fulfill our purpose in life. And for you as a healthcare worker, your purpose is pretty easy and straightforward. I mean, you're here to heal people, to make them better through your words and your actions in everything you do every single day. But if you allow fear to settle into that deep place into your heart and settle into your mind, I guarantee you're going to find yourself in the same situation that I had, where I literally found myself stopped in my tracks and thinking, is this really what I need to be doing? And for so many people, that fear, that stopping in your tracks, it can literally paralyze you. It can prevent you from moving forward to that journey that you were destined to do. And I know for me, one of the things that I know to be true when it comes to fear, for me, it pushes me to a place where I literally start second guessing myself. I am thinking all the time and allowing that doubt to creep on in. And pretty quickly, I'm going to a place and going down a road where if I'm not careful, I'm going to believe it. And that is how quickly it can happen to you. So I'm going to remind you, part of your journey here in Life School is you've got to get to that piece where you feel like you're achieving your highest potential. I mean, you know this. None of us want to be at a place in our lives where we really look at our life from a place of status quo, where it's acceptable for us to just navigate through life without any plans whatsoever, or just going through the motions and not really having any real experiences, where we can't look back and say, those experiences are tied to my purpose here on this earth. And that is incredibly dangerous when you fall into those patterns, because you know what happens. One day bleeds into the next, and then it all just kind of looks like one gigantic piece of time where you're wondering, and you're left wondering, like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? So I'm going to tell you, I can speak from personal experience that it is not always like rose petals, sunshine, rainbows, and happy bunnies all over the place. I know for me, again, this is something you have to consistently work at. And we do it through education. We do it by doing it over and over again and just getting to a place where it becomes repetitive. I had a really tough week this week. And I recognize for so many of you, there are going to be times where you are going to literally have a series of bad days. And then you're imagining and saying to yourself, I don't think it could get any worse. And guess what? It 100% gets worse. And then again, you feel like you want to crawl underneath the covers and just disappear from the world. So I totally understand how you feel. And I got your back, because I know just how hard it can be to lift yourself back up and push yourself forward. And I'm going to share with you a little secret of something that I learned quite some time ago, and then I've been using it and integrating it into my daily routine. And hopefully many of you are also using this as part of your routine. And I want to remind you, this is a great tool for you to use when you think about how you can heal your heart from all of the things that you experience every single day, so that you can make the most out of your life. And so, I think about this story. Before I'm going to share the tool, I'm going to share a story. Because when I was a brand new nurse, when I was a nurse very early in my career, I think very often of many of the people that I had taken care of. And this has happened through my entire nursing career. So, I know for all of you as healthcare workers, you have these same experiences where you cared for somebody or you provided care, and the experience itself was so impactful that it just kind of stuck very deeply in your mind. And you often, years later, keep thinking about that person, that experience, what happened, and how that person is doing, or how that person is managing. Or I'm left wondering about maybe that person. And I think about this boy. He literally was 19 years old, visiting the Jersey Shore with a bunch of his friends on a beautiful summer day. And of course, what do you do when you're 19 years old and you're a boy hanging out with your friends? People are jumping and surfing and body surfing into the waves. And this boy literally jumped into the water and hit a sandbar, and literally within a second found himself paralyzed from the chest down. And he rolled over and was able to get enough air into his lungs as the waves were still going, and a friend of him noticed something was wrong. And so he was pulled out from the beach. He was brought into the hospital. Everybody provided this care to stabilize him. And he got this shocking news that altered and changed his life forever. And I think about that boy all the time, because, boy, it's been a while. And I would say it's probably been about 25 plus years, maybe 30 years. So again, things can happen in our lives, and it can leave us thinking, what the heck do I do now? I mean, this, again, is an experience for me. It had such a profound effect. But again, I would challenge you to think, as that person that's going through it, that young boy, he was probably sitting there thinking, really? Like, I was hoping to go off to college, and really, I had all these plans for my life. And so this as a healthcare worker. I don't need to remind you this. You care for people who are sick and need to be healed. And you deserve everything, because you work so hard doing this amazing and extraordinary work. And you should be so proud of what you do. but you absolutely need to build in the time to refresh and rest your body and your mind and your spirit so you can come back and do it all over again. And when I think about that young boy, I think what it would have taken to continue to push through every day through rehab. And did he ever get to a point where he experienced healing and he could walk again? And if he didn't, what could he have done, or what did he do really in that situation to still see the world from a place of hope, to still experience things in life that he was meant to experience? And so I will tell you, the secret weapon and the tool that I use is from the great work of Mel Robbins. And you probably know this 5-second rule because everybody is talking about it everywhere. And they've been talking about it forever. But I loved this book. I devoured it because it's just full of beautiful examples of how people used Mel's famous 5-second rule to change their life in so many different ways. And I love it personally because I think in the book, she just does such a beautiful job of just explaining how you can use the 5-second rule for like so many different ways when it comes to just reigniting a passion in your life. I mean, you can wake up that person, that inner genius inside of you, that person that has put aside their plans and all of the things they wanted to do in their life, and you can find a way to master sort of this ability for yourself to self-monitor your own behavior, to be present, and to be super productive. And so I will tell you, I've used this in very simple ways. But I also want to tell you as a healthcare worker, and I'm going to teach you how to do it if you don't know it. And if you do know it, I want you to think about how as a healthcare worker, you can use that 5-second rule to redefine who you are as a healthcare worker, to help you get to that place where every day you find the time needed for that self-care. You find that opportunity for you to really step forward and become what you were destined to be. Because you know this as a healthcare worker, the work you do is very complex. It is extremely difficult. It is full of uncertainty, and it is downright grueling and frightening some days. And it requires courage to keep coming back and doing it over and over again. And you've got to push yourself forward because that's where the courage comes in, because it's determination, it's grit, because it's so much easier to take the path of least resistance. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm here to fess up. I did this exactly during that COVID experience. I was that person who pulled inward. I pulled myself off of social media. I really went to those very deep and dark places because it was just easier. And I didn't give myself the time, or I didn't make it a priority to make sure that I integrated healing into my everyday. So I'm a work in progress. Listen, I'm not here telling you that I do it right all the time, every single day, but I strive for consistency, and that's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Everything here in Life School is about consistency, and it's about finding those opportunities where you're going to fight like hell for yourself. And this rule is, in my opinion, it's a way for you to prove and honor yourself, to give yourself that confidence back, especially when you feel like you don't have it. And that happens a lot in healthcare because, again, it's unpredictable and you don't know what you're going to experience. And there are just some days where everything that you can experience is so overwhelming, you cannot see a pathway forward. That is just our reality, and it happens to the best of us. So I love in this book how Mel Robbins does such a beautiful job sharing her ideas for this 5-second rule and how it came about when her life was sort of spiraling out of control. And I want to read a portion of this book because, again, I think it's so incredibly powerful. And like, if you look at my copy of this book, it's highlighted, it's written in the corners just because I honestly feel like if you take a look at this from a different perspective and you allow yourself to look inward and you really think about how you can use this 5-second rule for healing, it will be transformative for you. I guarantee you. But I love in the book how Mel talks about, and she very openly and beautifully, this is on page 29 of the book. She talks very openly and beautifully about how she actually discovered this 5-second rule. And one of the things that I think is remarkable is she talks about how, at the age of 41 years old, she was facing lots of problems in her life, money, work, problems in her marriage. She was waking up every day feeling this sense of dread. And when the alarm would go off, she would feel like, I don't even have the energy in to face the day, to get up and to push myself forward. Or she would lie awake at night and she would worry about all of her problems and barely be able to get herself out of bed in the morning to be able to get her kids off to school and then start her day. And I'm going to remind you, when you think about that scenario, that happens to so many people. And when you're in that space, I can just tell you, you wind up really spending an enormous amount of time just imagining all of the very bad and tragic things that are happening in your life or potentially could happen in your life, or all the regrets that you had, or all of the failures that you experienced. Literally, that is where you land during that period. And I think it's remarkable because, again, it just shows in Mel's great work, like when you feel defeated and you're feeling that all the time and you feel like your life is sort of in that gutter, it's time to take action. And I love how she says in the book on page 31, she says, no matter how bad your life can seem, you can always make it worse. I drank too much, way too much. I was jealous of friends who didn't have to work, and I was bitchy and judgmental. And I just think, that really settled in with me because that was my wake-up call. Like, that was me looking in the mirror during the pandemic, because boy, was I frustrated and angry at everybody that was sitting at home baking and doing really great things when I was donning and doffing my PPE and putting myself at risk and my family at risk. So again, we've all been there, and you can see that in those experiences. But what I love, love, love in the book is how she so vulnerably depicts how she really tried to push herself forward to show and pretend that everything is fine. And I'm going to remind you, this is a huge trap for so many of us as healthcare workers. It's for so many of us as people, because it's so alluring to look at people in social media and what they're doing. And instead of being happy and joyous for what people are accomplishing and doing in their life, if you are not careful, you can go to a place where you become envious and jealous, and nothing good will come from that. So again, I'm going to remind you, this rule is fabulous because she says, when she came up with this entire idea, like she knew she had to start her day off right. She knew she had to start the day off, and every sort of day she would just look at this from the lens, all right, tomorrow is going to be a different day. And she found herself, her self-confidence in this death spiral. And so I love on page 34 of the book how she, and I really just want to read this little snippet, how she says she really had that sort of aha moment. She said, in my case, it was getting up on time, lying in bed every night. I would make promises to myself that tomorrow I would change. Tomorrow I will change. Tomorrow I will wake up earlier. Tomorrow I will have a better attitude, and I will try a little harder. And I will go to the gym, and I'll be nice to my husband, and I'm going to eat healthy, and I won't drink so much. Tomorrow I will be the future me. And I love, love, love that, because right after she says that, she says, and then the alarm would go off at 6 a.m. I would close my eyes, and the cycle would begin the very next morning. When the alarm rang, I didn't feel like the future me. I felt like the old me. And for so many of you, that is absolutely how we feel. And so I love in the book, she sort of talks about how this image or this 5-second rule sort of was birthed. And for me, I wanted to look at it, or the way I try to look at it is from the lens of, how a spaceship takes off. And she does the same in the book. But for me, I feel like it's a rocket that's full of power. And literally, she uses the 5-second rule of giving yourself sort of that time to go in descending order and counting off 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and leaping up and taking action. And I think that this is brilliant because, again, the descending order of just these 5 seconds allows your brain to become disrupted. So you absolutely 100% can get to a place where you literally are saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to do it. And this is going to take practice. And for some of you, you're going to say to me, it doesn't work for me. And I'm going to remind you, everything in life is done through practice. So don't be that person that's self-defeating yourself even before you're getting out of the bed and trying it 25, 30, 50 times. Keep at it. It works and it will continue to work. And for some of you, I know for me, like when I get to 1, I try to picture my loved ones, the people that matter the most in my life, because that is what's so important to me. And so that is my motivation to pop on out of the bed and do what I need to do. And again, I'm going to remind you the way our brains work, this is all based sort of on the neurobiology of our brains. And Mel points it out in the book. She does it on page 39. And I think it is so remarkable where she talks about the research that she found when she did this 5-second rule and what she learned in the process. And I think it's beautiful. She says in the book, later I would learn that when you count backwards, you mentally shift the gears in your mind. You interrupt your default thinking and you do what psychologists call assert control. The counting distracts you from your excuses and focuses your mind on moving in a new direction. And when you physically move, instead of stopping to think, your physiology changes and your mind falls in line. And I love that because it's so impactful, right? It's that you're interrupting that cycle and you're giving yourself the freedom and the ability to be able to take the necessary action to move forward. So let's talk about all the ways that you can use the 5-second rule, because in my mind as healthcare workers, there's like a million different ways you can use it, right? And the wheels will start turning in your mind as well. And so if you haven't read the book or you don't listen to Mel's podcast, you absolutely should be doing that because it's extraordinary and it's amazing. But let's start with just some of the typical things that we can find ourselves doing as healthcare workers. Number 1 is our negative thoughts. You know this. If we sit in that place for longer than that 5 seconds, what happens is we allow those negative thoughts to ruminate, and then very quickly there will be 15 reasons of why you shouldn't take any action. And you're going to be like, nope, not today. Today is not going to be my day. Tomorrow will be my day. So I'm going to remind you here in Life School, you don't know if you're going to have it tomorrow. So make today your today. And you know this. And I feel like for most healthcare workers, and even for just all of us as human beings, I think one of the things that many people struggle with is procrastination. I mean, I think about Howard Zinn's book, You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train, right? And I think about that concept all the time. Things are moving forward. Actions are happening all of the time. You're constantly in a state where things are moving forward. You cannot be neutral, right? If you're not moving, there's a lot of things happening in all different directions, and doing nothing just means that you're accepting and you're finding yourself in a place where the status quo is acceptable. And I'm going to remind you, as a healthcare worker, you're a healer. So there is no opportunity for status quo for you. You have to get to a place where you recognize that the work that you do, you're here to grow and to get better and to just achieve mastery and to teach others and to support others and encourage others and to make a difference in someone's life, someone that you're interacting with every single day. That is your responsibility because you're a healer. That's not everybody that gets to do that, but you absolutely 100% can do that. And then for some people, you really struggle with like having the courage to push yourself forward. I know for me, I have a keynote called The Courage to Care, and I love giving that keynote because it's a reminder that it takes incredible courage to care for people, perfect strangers, even staff or team members if you're a leader, interacting with people because they're coming from a completely different perspective that you have. But there are things we can do essentially to give us that courage to put on our capes and to feel like we can conquer the things that seem like they're impossible to do. And that is 100% in your control. And you can do this. You can find that courage within, even when you might think you don't have it. That's the beautiful thing about our minds and the way they work, especially when we allow ourselves that still, soft silence and we allow ourselves to get to a place of creativity. I mean, it just becomes remarkable of the things that we can accomplish when we just simply believe in ourselves. And I'm going to remind you, as a healthcare worker, you have gifts and skills and talents that not many people have in this earth. And so use them and find that courage. But you also have to listen to your gut, and you've got to learn how to actually tap into that little voice that communicates. For some people, it's a gut instinct. Like you can feel it. It's a sensation. For me, I will tell you, I have spent years practicing on how to listen to that still sort of direction that's coming instinctual from me. And in the busyness of the work that we do, sometimes we run the risk that we don't allow that instinct to come forward. We bury it deep, and we just get into a state where we are moving and grooving and not even listening to that inner voice that's trying to give us direction. And you can use the 5-second rule to get yourself out of a state or a situation where you might be thinking, why do I even bother? I mean, it's not even worthwhile for me. And I know for me, this is a constant struggle that I work on, I would say 4 to 5 times a week, myself personally. And I say this personally because, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. Of course, my children are all young adults. And so that makes it a little bit easier. But through my entire life, when I look at my career, balancing my career and being a mom and doing it all, there were many, many times where I had to really look at myself from that lens of, okay, there's lots of reasons why you're bothering, right? You're directing and providing support to your family, right? You're making sure it's a safe place for everybody to be, and you're trying to create the conditions for everybody to thrive. And so for those of you that can't see the picture and you're stuck in that place of why bother, I'm going to encourage you. That 5-second rule, that'll help you shift and change that in yourself. And for so many of you, self-doubt is the thing that holds you back. And boy, do I know this. And I will tell you, you are 100% worth it. But just like I talked about in the beginning, when we think about how this works in our minds and how the things we think about ourselves or we hear about ourselves, if we're not careful, if we allow them to settle in, that is the way we see ourselves. And I will tell you, I actually when I was thinking about this topic of self-doubt, what kind of came into my mind? I'm a huge Bridgerton fan. Okay, I don't get to watch much. It seems like I watch a lot because I watched Bratz and I watched Bridgerton, but I really just started my season 3, part 2 of Bridgerton. And I love how they depicted this beautiful scene between Penelope and Colin. And I was thinking to myself, just how beautiful Nicola Coughlan looked in those images, that beautiful image of her and Colin together, which were so intimate and had to be extremely difficult as an actor to film. And then what settled in my head was also in that documentary during Bratz, how Ally McSheedy said when she filmed The Breakfast Club, it was just so easy of a role for her to be Allison, because that is who she was and that is who she channeled. And she could just feel herself becoming that. And so for all of us, when we think about that, what we think about and how we allow it to shape our paths and our minds, it's absolutely incredibly powerful. And if you struggle with feeling worthy enough, or you struggle with feelings of, I don't feel adequate enough, I'm going to remind you here, just strap on that ability to be an actor and push it through. So I'm going to tell you, this is a simple and easy way, this 5-second rule, really to just shift your routine and to get you to change your mindset. And again, it's easy for us as healthcare workers to get really deep down and dirty and focus in on all the worries that we have, right? Because we are caring for other people. And in that process, if you're not careful, that energy goes out of you. And if you're not finding ways to deplete it back inside of you, you're going to feel overwhelmed. You are going to feel like you can't manage it. So you're going to need to build in that time for self-care. That is so incredibly important. And I'm going to tell you, I think the 5-second rule, for some of you, it's really just going to help you with fear and anxiety and get you to that state where you're going to be moving forward, because you're not going to allow that opportunity to fear to settle in. Because once you start that countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you get to 1 and you know automatically it's to spring yourself forward and to make an action, you're not going to allow fear to set in, because you've already accomplished something that's pretty darn remarkable. And I will tell you, when I think of all of this idea of, facing your fears and really coming from a place where you can be your true, authentic self, I'm going to remind you that when you were serving during the pandemic, when you were experiencing all of that pain and suffering firsthand, when you were taking all of those experiences, and I know because they were settling into your heart and into your mind, for many of you, you didn't properly deal with those feelings. Like me, I didn't either, right? And I can absolutely admit, again, I put my fingers up because I too was equally guilty, right, of just finding different ways to cope. But I'm here to remind you that we all have a journey here in life school, and we have to be mindful that those negative feelings, those feelings that were never meant to be attached to our spirit, we must find ways to let them go. And the only way we're going to do that is through self-care and forming those new habits every single day. And you know what happens beautifully in the process? You wind up experiencing more. I mean, you just naturally do, because you're going to be so proud of the work that you're doing by pushing yourself forward instead of allowing yourself to be pulled down. Listen, I hope you enjoyed the message in this podcast, and I hope you listen into a future podcast. And if you don't hear it enough, thank you for everything you do every single day in the care of people. Goodbye.